Like every feature film from Pixar's main franchise, Toy Story 5 is fantastic and very emotional. But did you know there are a few things in this movie that make absolutely no sense? Timeline. While some animated franchises prefer to have a timeline where the characters never age, Toy Story does the opposite, with each one of its movies having time jumps so the humans can grow older and technology can evolve. So much so that Toy Story 5 is specifically about the evolution of our society, with electronic devices taking over everything. But it is precisely from this movie onward that the saga's timeline starts to get strange, because the world of Toy Story 5 is so technological and so connected to machines that it seems to be set in 2026. The first Toy Story takes place around the time the movie was released in 1995. The third feature film takes place between 2006 and 2007, since Andy was 17 years old during that story, and he was 6 in the first movie. Toy Story 4 takes place between 1 and 2 years after the events of the third movie, with Bonnie being 6 years old. Toy Story 5 confirms that she is now 8 years old, which means another 2 years or so have passed since the events of the previous movie. In other words, this story takes place roughly between 2009 and 2011, basically in the early 2010s, when electronic devices were just starting to become popular. That is exactly the problem. Judging by the way all the kids have tablets, phones, or computers, it feels like this story is reflecting the current times of the 2020s much more. For some reason, the franchise's universe is 10 years ahead, and that is really strange. And this is only one of the 11 things that don't make sense in Toy Story 5.
That's right, another Cinewave is coming for you to enjoy.
Zurg. One of the best jokes in these movies is when Emperor Zurg reveals to Buzz Lightyear that he is his father, a reference to one of the biggest plot twists in cinema, which happens in Star Wars. This joke was first made in Toy Story 2, but it was brought back in Toy Story 5, with Buzz himself revealing to the Multibuzzes that Zurg is their father. However, this stops making sense when we think about it a little more. In 2022, the movie Lightyear was released. It tells the story of the character that the Buzz Lightyear toy was based on, so much so that Pixar says this is the movie Andy watched as a child back in the 90s. And that movie really does have a plot twist about Zurg's identity, but it is not about him being Buzz's father. In fact, it is revealed that the villain is an alternate version of Buzz Lightyear from the future. That is fantastic, but if this movie exists in the Toy Story universe, why do the characters keep saying that Zurg is Buzz Lightyear's father? Everyone should know that Zurg is actually Buzz himself from the future. Did none of the toys watch Lightyear? Lilypad. If Toy Story 5 has a villain, that villain is Lilypad. The tablet may have regretted the way she acted in the end, but we all have to agree that she caused a lot of trouble for Jessie and her group. A normal tablet would already cause plenty of problems for the toys, but Lilypad does some things that an ordinary tablet should never be able to do. For example, there is a moment when she hacks the robot vacuum in the house. Lilypad is also the one who unlocks the Multibuzz's flying function, which means she can hack basically any other electronic device without much difficulty. This does not make sense for many different reasons. First of all, a regular tablet cannot do that. Second, Lilypad is just a children's tablet, something that should have far fewer functions than a normal tablet. On top of all that, we are not even talking about a modern children's tablet, but a device from the early 2000s. The more we think about it, the stranger it gets that Lilypad is so technologically advanced. Multibuzz. If it is strange that Lilypad can hack other devices, then the Multibuzzes are on another level. They are Buzz Lightyears so advanced that they can communicate with each other through data transmission. And that is not even the craziest part, because the Multibuzzes can actually fly. No, we are not talking about the falling with style that the regular Buzz has done since the first Toy Story. These new models are truly able to fly freely, as if they were drones. We do not even need to explain how absurd that is, right? Yes, there are toys that do some pretty surreal things like flying, but the Multibuzzes are on a level that is almost unbelievable, especially when we remember that we are talking about toys from the early 2000s. But even today, it is pretty hard to find a child playing with an action figure that can turn into a drone. And you, what did you think of the Multibuzzes? Comment #Buzz down below with your opinion.
Jessie. The most popular joke in Toy Story 5, which even appeared in the trailers, is that Woody is going bald. Toys do not age like humans, but they still wear down over time, and the paint that represents his hair has started to fade. It is nice to be reminded that toys lose quality as the years go by, but if that is the case, why does Jessie still look brand new? Just like Woody, she comes from a toy line made in the 50s, and her story focuses a lot on that. Her first owner was Emily, who played with her during the mid-50s and 60s. However, Jessie does not show any signs of aging. She is flawless, as if she had just come out of a
store recently, while Woody is all worn out. Looks like life really does have its favorites. Not important. The Multibuzzes are really funny, and no one can deny that. It is simply hilarious to see the original Buzz commanding the high-tech versions of himself. But if we watch the movie closely, we can notice a curious little detail. The story of Toy Story 5 would not change that much if the Multibuzzes were not in the movie. This battalion of Buzz Lightyears is only important at the end, when they learn how to fly and take the toys back to Bonnie. However, for most of the movie, they are living through an isolated adventure that could easily be removed from Toy Story 5 and turned into its own short film. That is a little strange, but we have a theory that explains why this happened. The Multibuzz army was the first element of Toy Story 5 to be revealed, since their presence had been confirmed along with the project's release announcement. It is very likely that the script was not ready at that time, so it is possible that the original idea was for the Multibuzzes to be much more important characters. Maybe the plan was for them to be the main villains of Toy Story 5. As the movie script was developed, the focus ended up shifting to Lilypad and Jessie, causing the Multibuzzes to lose screen time. However, since the Multibuzzes had already been announced, they had to be kept in the story, even with less prominence. Either way, it was really fun to see them in the movie. Secret revealed. Since the first Toy Story, there has been one sacred rule. Toys cannot reveal to humans that they are alive, and that rule has been followed very strictly most of the time, except for the ending of the first Toy Story, when Woody and the other toys revealed that they were alive to Sid, a spoiled kid who played very cruel games with his toys. That left Sid terrified, and from what it seems, the boy never touched a toy again for the rest of his life. However, it is kind of weird that what Woody did in that movie never had any consequences in the future of the franchise. Technically, Sid still knows that toys are alive, but none of the sequels ever touched on that subject. Whether we like it or not, that is dangerous. What if Sid returns, now as an adult, to try to get revenge on Woody and Buzz Lightyear? That still has not happened, but it would be amazing if the story of a possible Toy Story 6 had Sid as the villain. Can you imagine that? Lack of attention. We said that no one besides Sid discovered the toy's secret, but let's be honest, it is not because Woody, Jessie, Buzz, and the others are masters of disguise, but because the humans in the Toy Story universe seem to be trying really hard not to notice that the toys move on their own. Throughout the entire franchise, there are several moments when the humans should realize that something is very wrong with the toys, since they keep showing up in completely random places, different from where they were before, sometimes just a few seconds after everyone looked away from them. It is fine for someone to think they got confused once or twice, but this happens all the time. Subscribing is quick, easy, and keeps you updated with everything happening here. Let's go! Blaze was tricked. In Toy Story 5, the toys are much bolder when it comes to tricking humans. At one point, Jessie makes Smarty Pants send messages to Bonnie, so the girl will visit Blaze and pick Jessie up. But can you believe that this visit actually happens? And Blaze does not even wonder how Bonnie found her house. And later, they became best friends, but Bonnie never even mentioned those messages Blaze supposedly sent, but that were actually sent by Smarty Pants. It is kind of unbelievable that this conversation never happened. All of this is also very convenient for the toys, because if Blaze found out that someone pretended to be her and sent messages to Bonnie before the two of them had even met, it would only be a matter of time before she discovered the toy's secret. Bonnie was tricked. If you thought it was a huge coincidence that Blaze never found out about Bonnie's messages, just know that this was not even the only time a coincidence like that happened in Toy Story 5. In fact, there was another very similar moment, when Lilypad sent a message to Mr. Anderson, Bonnie's father. In this message, the tablet pretended to be the girl and asked Bonnie's father to put her toys away in the garage. Mr. Anderson did it, and after Bonnie found out, she said she had never asked her father to do that. Even so, she never actually looked at the message that had been sent, and she did not think about it any further. If Bonnie and Mr. Anderson had thought about it more, she would have realized that something was very wrong. Wedding. Another huge coincidence that happens in this movie is right at the very end, when Bonnie goes to play with Blaze and decides to play a wedding game. And guess which toys Bonnie decides should become husband and wife? Buzz Lightyear and Jessie. This gave us a really cute wedding scene, but it is very convenient that Bonnie chose exactly the two toys who are actually living a romance to get married. Bonnie should not know that Buzz and Jessie are in love with each other, so how did she choose exactly those two to get married? Or could it be that Bonnie has such a strong connection with her toys that she can tell when one of them is in love with another, even without knowing they are alive? Before you go, take a look at the two videos on the screen. Thanks for watching, and see you next time!